Do you guys remember back in June, a game dropped from Remedy, of all companies? Remedy dropped a live service game and it didn't go super well. Basically what happened, Remedy dropped a game called FBC Firebreak. And Remedy, of course, are the same guys that did Alan Wake and did Control and all that. And this game is actually set in the universe of Control, and you know, it's got a lot of direct inspiration, even asset, you know, things taken and copy and pasted over. But they dropped this, like, I believe it's a 3-player multiplayer shooter, whatever. But they held their earnings calls and they discussed all of the results of this launch. And it was a complex thing. As you can see here, Remedy was, quote, unsatisfied by the poor sales of FBC Firebreak and a tiny PC player base, but says, quote, despite the rocky launch, we believe we have a solid game to build on. So they don't plan on dropping it. The majority of the game's money, though, was made through deals to put it on Game Pass and PlayStation Plus rather than actual copies sold. And this is what I said in the run-up to its release, was the saving grace potentially for it was that it was on all of these subscription services, because I think they wanted $30 for it. And I'm sorry, like, unless you are a giga company or in a very well-established IP and it's a familiar game like Night Rain, where it's like, hey, it's Elden Ring, but multiplayer. That's something people can easily understand. This one, it's like, it's in the universe of Control, but it plays nothing like Control. It's a harder sell, I think. So yeah, so player drop-off rates have been really, really rough. As you can see, just 5% of players own a level 3 perk. That's not great. Means a lot of people are probably downloading the game through Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, but they aren't even launching it, or they're launching it once and never booting into it again. That's not great. It's just not. On consoles, there seems to be a bit more interest. Remedy recently touted hitting 1 million players, a number certainly not reached primarily on PC, but the other part of that equation is that Firebreak is available on Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. Higher volume of players on Xbox and PlayStation hardware doesn't indicate good sales or even folks sticking with the game. It's why you got to be cautious. You remember back in the day, all of like 3 months ago, with AC Shadows, people were like, Ubisoft is only talking about like revenue numbers, and they're only talking about players and engagement. They're not talking about units sold and all this. And players, or maybe not players specifically, but people who were discussing that were right to bring that up and be like, hey, they're choosing their words very carefully. And it's true. Those words were chosen very, very carefully. And it can often be indicative of maybe like the units sold is not that impressive. But what I tried to remind people is that AC Shadows has a lot of microtransactions. It has a lot of skins. It has XP boosts. It has the DLC expansion season pass or whatever. And that's where they make the lion's share of their money. It's not an upfront sales. It's about the tail on it. That's where they make a ton of it. And so for investors in Ubisoft, they care more about that engagement rather than just straight up units, which is why they were willing to sell it at discounts relatively, or historically games at discounts relatively quickly. Because if they can get you in to AC Odyssey, the odds of you buying a skin or a cosmetic shoot up. If they can get you into AC Valhalla, the odds of you spending money on high margin things like, you know, cosmetics skyrocket. If they can just get the foot in the door, that can go well. This, on the other hand, is the opposite side of that debate, where they're mentioning players, saying we hit 1 million players, and that can sound amazing for a live service game until you realize, what defines a player? Does that just mean somebody who downloaded the game from Game Pass for free or included in their membership and never booted it up? Does player mean they booted up the game, or does player mean that you've reached a certain level of character? Like, how are you defining player? Because if you use a really unremarkable definition of player and you're like, no, it's just people who have downloaded the game, then you can start to understand how that number of 1 million players means almost nothing. You can have a game with 1 million players that's losing and hemorrhaging money if you have 1 million players, but only 5% of them are playing past level 3 on their characters. You know, it just doesn't work. So the point of this is to say, whether it's Ubisoft or Remedy, you have to be aware of what language is being used, and you also have to look at the specific offering. And if it's a live service game or a game with live service like shops and monetization elements, it's not just about raw players. It's about how they're engaging. It's about how they're spending on the back end. Their latest investor report seems to confirm that analysis. It states, quote, the majority of players were Xbox Series X and S series and PlayStation 5 players, and that thus far FBC Firebreak's commercial performance has largely been driven by Xbox and PlayStation service agreements. So they're saying the majority of the money or the performance has largely been driven by the deals they made to have them go on Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, not necessarily from player spending, which is like, that's not what you want, you know? You'd hope the players are spending money, because the players are the ones that are going to be there a month after launch or 3 months after launch. You know, you kind of need that. It's not great. Not great if you're still relying on like the exclusivity deal of this or that, or the marketing deal for this or that. It's not what you want. They say reception is improving over time as the game is updated, and that despite a rocky launch, we believe we have a solid game to build on. Pointing to major update in September, it's optimistic about the game's future, but it's hard to see it as anything other than a brave face to investors. Turning things around seems almost impossible for a game so few have stuck with, and I don't see anything in the planned updates substantial enough or arriving quickly enough to make a big difference there. And this is kind of my perspective. The fact that most people have already forgotten about it, and even when they did have some trailers for it, for example, like, it just doesn't look that remarkable. Like, even if you get it through Game Pass, it maybe is a game you play with your buddies one night, but this is kind of what it looks like to me, is a game that you boot up, you play for 3 hours on a Friday night with your friends, and you never touch it again, because the next week there's another game on Game Pass for you to try, you know? It's the give and the take with being on a subscription service and not being a premium title. Like, the idea of being a premium title for a lot of these companies is that if they can get you to spend 30, 40, 50 bucks, whatever it is, to get your, like, to literally get entrance into the nightclub, you're likely to stay there for longer. Even if you go to the nightclub and your first drink that you ordered is not that good, because you already spent 50 bucks to get in, you're likely to spend another 10, 15 to try another drink and see if that one's better. Because it's like the sunk cost fallacy. It's like it's what happened with Suicide Squad. People were like, hey, I paid 70 bucks to get in here. I can't just give up on it immediately, even though after an hour I'm not having fun. I already paid 70 bucks, so I'm going to stick with it. I got to like it. I have to get my money's worth out of it. And it's why a lot of other companies have looked at doing premium pricing for some of these games too, because it's not just about like getting over that initial hump of maybe players don't like the first few hours. It's also just a matter of practicality, where, like, say you have a game like Marathon where the vast majority of matches are dependent on having 3-player teams, because as of right now they don't have a solo queue. So you need a certain number of players to fill out a lobby with 4 or 5 teams of 3. You just have to have it. And if you're free to play, you'll initially get a lot of players flooding in to just try it for free, but the likelihood of them dropping off after a match or two, especially in an extraction shooter where frustration is very high, that's going to be much, much more likely than if somebody put the money up as a premium experience first, you know? So it's a tale as old as time of a live service game running into troubles very, very quickly. But this is something I think most of us could have told you. Most of us could have giving you the heads up. And, you know, it's excuse me, I don't have my coffee today, and you can tell. I think it was Remedy's attempt to break into the live service craze, and it's what investors expected, and it never really made that much sense. And, you know, I respect them for trying, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to just throw money at them as, like, you know, a pat on the head charity thing where it's like, hey, you guys tried. Good job. If it doesn't make sense, if it's not that fun, and there's other games out there that are more fun or free or that my friends are already playing, I'm just going to go play those. Like, it's too competitive to do this kind of thing. But by the time this came out, I'm sure it had already been in the works for years, so they couldn't just walk away. But still.